So in 2010, I've been doing e-commerce stuff for a while, writing PHP applications largely. But we'd started to do B2B applications at that time. We'd largely been doing B2C until then. It was making me very sad. So our clients were coming up with these what seemed like crazy requirements about what people could see, who could buy what within a particular catalogue. And especially in the B2B world, you get to deal with sales reps and all the special privileges they have. So they can do things like log in and pretend to be 10 of their customers at the same time and place an order for all 10, but pay for it with one payment. So this broke so many assumptions of what we were doing in B2C e-commerce before. And even more quirky things, if they paid for something with an internal budget or something like that, then the client viewed that as an internal transaction. It wasn't a proper transaction, so you didn't pay tax on that. But this led to situations where you could pay tax on half a product and all kinds of quirky things. And it wasn't a happy time in general, and it really was like bending our PHP e-commerce framework to breaking point. Now, about the time when I was working at Tangent, we acquired another agency, and they were a Django agency, so they came with Django projects and Django developers. And I was working on these PHP e-commerce things, and I was talking to these other guys in the kitchen, and I could see the stuff they were doing, I could see that process, and I was jealous. And so it got to the point where I decided I was going to spend my own time to kind of rewrite how I wanted the e-commerce framework to be in Django, using this new technology I was kind of aware of. And what came out of that was Oscar. And so after a while I got to a point where I could convince Tangent to use it. And since then it's become the basis for all our projects. And it's now, I think it's the most popular piece of Python e-commerce software. And it's used in production by Tata Group, Carlsberg, PepsiCo, Papa John's, and Vodafone, amongst others. Anyway, so my name is David Winterbottom, and the next 12 minutes or so, however long I've got left, will be a brief introduction to Django-oscar. I'm going to talk a little bit about what it is, why it exists, I've already covered that a little bit, but then also how some of the techniques we employ to allow it to be customized. And then I'll just talk a little bit about its future, what we're trying to do with this. So, e-commerce. So Oscar is just trying to do e-commerce for you. That's it, really, trying to keep it focused. So it provides the core things you need to do products, categories, browsing, search, baskets, orders, fulfillment, payment, shipping, all that kind of stuff that's e-commerce. It's not trying to be a CMS, really. And it does this through providing a set of overridable apps. We'll come on to what overriding means. Now again, it's not, in some CMSs, when you use them, will try and kind of own the whole Django application. They want to own the home page, and everything in the site has to kind of be pushed through the CMS. That's not what Oscar is trying to be. It's just a set of apps. If you've got an existing site right now, it's a brochure site, you want to add e-commerce, you can just put /shop as a kind of URL prefix, and Oscar can sit happily there and work within your existing site. It's not trying to own everything. And some of the software that we leverage as part of Oscar, we use Haystack for search, we use Treebeard to do the kind of category tree structure, Pillow for some images, there's a few other dependencies as well, but those are kind of some of the key ones. Okay, so this is a screenshot of the default templates that Oscar ships with. So Oscar does ship with some templates, because one of its purposes is to allow kind of e-commerce sites to be built rapidly. And so, while you can throw all these away if you want, the core Oscar ships with a set of templates built off Bootstrap 2.3, and they look a bit like this. It also ships with a dashboard. It's not using the Django admin. We have a kind of custom dashboard where we can control the UX and make it work for us. Try and optimize it for kind of e-commerce flows, if you like. This is a shot from the catalog dashboard. Okay, so philosophically, Oscar isn't an out-of-the-box product. It's not like Shopify, for instance. We're not trying to compete with them. If you just find a whole load of merchandise in your loft, you can use Shopify to set up a store and have that selling that within an hour. That's not the problem we're trying to solve. Ours is quite different. So Oscar is trying to be leading in the core. It's trying to not make decisions about how your e-commerce store should work. And the thinking behind Oscar is when you do a site using it, you don't have to kind of undo lots of things to get to the point where you can start making it what you want to do. It's kind of trying to be agnostic about the domain. And so there's several things it doesn't really have an opinion about at all. So, I don't know whether your shop's in the UK or Europe and the US. I've got no idea how your taxes are going to be applied. Do we know them up front, like in the UK, everything's vatable, or not at all, like in the US, where you don't know what the taxes are at all until someone's entered their shipping address. Similarly, we don't know how you're going to pay for things. It could be Stripe, PayPal, Data Cash. Oscar provides the kind of building blocks for you to do this quickly. And there's a kind of growing ecosystem of Oscar extensions, especially around payment. It's easy to write payment gateway integration, so you can quickly do PayPal Express or some other gateway. And similarly, shipping, we don't know how shipping charges are going to be, or your fulfillment pipeline as well. Some people, it'll just be a kind of guy in a warehouse who logs on and wants to see a list of all the latest orders, print off a pick and slip and go and put them in the van. Or if it's like a larger scale, it often involves kind of pushing files around over FTP, that kind of thing. So Oscar doesn't have any opinion about how these things will work. We just try to provide a base platform for you to quickly implement it. And so, like a lot of software, I suppose the software that was popular, the reason that this was written is just to make my life easier. I was so sick of kind of the pain of the day-to-day work with the old code base. But it's evolved a bit from that. So that tangent, it's now become something that we use to drive our own efficiency. So you want to get to the point where we have a new client, we can talk to them about their requirements, and we can rapidly build a fairly complicated e-commerce shop for them. And so its real kind of reason for being is to allow people to build complicated but maintainable e-commerce sites. So maintainable in the sense that that original site I talked about in PHP, the B2B one, we did it. We actually did meet all the requirements, but it involves so many mostly hacks, in so many ways where you're kind of working against how the framework wants you to work, that it becomes horrible to maintain. And actually, as an agency, that's a really bad thing, because people don't want to work on it, and it can lead to turnover and other things. You don't want sites that no one wants to work on. Okay, so a lot of thinking went into how Oscar was designed. Actually, just before I started working on Oscar, I became a dad for the first time, and it was really frustrating because I was so used to having all my evenings to spend 3 or 4 hours hacking around on things, and then overnight it disappeared, it comes to any event. And so I was desperate to kind of get stuck into Oscar and Django and start writing models and things, but I couldn't. I had to just walk around North London pushing a buggy. But during that time, all I could do was think about what I would do when I finally got to sit in front of a keyboard. And while that's kind of frustrating, it's actually a really great process for writing software, to force yourself not to write anything until you've walked around for 3 hours thinking about it. So if you take anything away from that, well, having kids can improve your programming. Anyway, so here's an example maybe of something that Oscar does differently to other e-commerce frameworks. So let's just consider a section of product with 2 scoops of book. And we want to work on prices on our site, so we can look at it the normal way through the URL. And a simple e-commerce framework will probably put the price field on the product model directly. That's the simplest thing that works. That's not how Oscar does it, because we've learned the hard way that doesn't work when you have more complicated scenarios. So this is what Oscar does. We have a kind of selector class, and it will load a strategy object for you based on a request. So what this basically allows you to do have different strategies depending on who the user is, where they're coming from, what the IP is, that kind of thing. And then you ask the strategy for some purchase information for a particular product. And what the purchase information will tell you is things like the price, things like the currency, things like, is it available to that particular user? Yes, and the availability message as well. So that seems quite complicated, but these pluggable strategies, I like to call them, give you enormous flexibility. So if you have a site and you want to sell to people in the UK and the US, and you're all at the same time, same code base, you're not redirecting off to different subdomains, you can do this using strategies, because you can use the strategy to look at the IP address and say, okay, this person is in the US, we show all prices without tax, it's only available, because we're using a different partner that's in the States. And so it lets you do multi-territory, multi-currency shops on the same code base in a fairly clean, easy to override way. So it lets you solve this difficult situation with the different tax models between the UK and the US. And then you get fancy with this kind of stuff. We have clients at Tangent who want to do VIP schemes. So if you're a particular type of customer, you see a totally different set of prices, or maybe get it delivered quicker like Amazon Prime or something like that. This buys you the flexibility for doing that kind of thing. Okay. So, customizing Oscar. Now I'm going to have to gloss over the details quite a lot here, because it does get a little bit fiddly. But let's have a quick look. So, I'm sure you recall from Django 1.5, I think it was, they introduced the ability to replace the user model. That's a nice trick, and that's a commonly requested feature for a long time. Okay, so you can use a setting to specify an app label or a model name, works fine. Oscar takes that and runs with it a long way. So virtually every model in Oscar is abstract. And we use this get model function from core Django, which walks through your installed apps, looks for a match on the app label. Brilliant, let's load that model we found it. And using this trick, we can actually allow any model in Oscar to be replaced and extended and have extra fields added to it and that kind of thing. But we go even further. We we go further. So we have a function called getClass. It's like a generalization of getModel. And then what this lets you do is load any class in the same way that getModel works. And so instead of just giving it an app label, we now give it an app label and a module name, so order.utils, and then some kind of object we want to load from that module. And what this will do is it'll walk through your installed app, so it'll look for an app called order. It'll say, brilliant, okay, has it got a module called utils? Yes, fantastic. And in that module, does it have a class called order creator? And if it does, it will load your particular order creator. But if it can't find it, it'll just fall back to Oscar's one. And so using this trick, this is how you kind of override apps in a sense. So if you want to replace stuff in the order app, you don't include Oscar's order app in your installed apps. You create your own one. But you don't have to kind of copy and paste the entire app from Oscar into your project. You can just replace that one class you want to fiddle with. And this kind of approach of kind of forking an app and then editing it is behind a lot of how Oscar works in a sense. It does come with its own difficulty, especially around migrations when you're changing the schema, but these are all solvable, and we've learned the hard way how to do these things. But that, as a very brief overview, is the core behind how Oscar is flexible. So we write everything as an abstract model, we write everything as a class that can then be overridden and customized. And then we try and keep the core assumptions of those classes and models, we try and keep them lean and unopinionated so they don't contain stuff that you don't want. Okay, so that's the kind of philosophy. And a little bit more on URLs and views, like common things you want to change if you're building an e-commerce site. So I think this is a snippet from the Django documentation. This is how you include the admin URLs. I know it was puzzled me actually when I started learning Django, because this is a bit different to how you normally included a URLs module, because admin.site.urls isn't a module, it's a property and an object. If you want to customize that, you can write your own admin.py module in one of your apps. You can define one of these classes where you define a getURLs method, and you can tinker around with URLs and add new ones, that kind of thing. So that's again how the approach at Oscar takes. So a kind of default Oscar site would do something like this, where we have this from Oscar.app import application, and then we're including an application.urls in our URLs patterns. And like the Django admin, that's actually a property and an object rather than a particular URLs module. And we use the same kind of approach to let people reach in and change the view class that handles, the checkout or the catalog detail page or something like that. And it looks a bit like this. It's a kind of tree structure of what we would call these application classes. And you can see we're using the get class here to define the class properties, which is kind of the next level down in the tree. So the catalog app has all the catalog views in it, and the basket app has all the basket ones. And if we jump down to, say, a particular application in a particular project, you can replace the default catalog app object, if you like, and then you can just replace the link to the view. And so actually, instead of using Oscar's for payment details view to checkout, use my one. I want to implement how we take payment or some quirky logic around what happens at checkout. And I haven't included the full details, but you can also play with kind of access control here, what decorators you're going to wrap around these views. You can get rid of whole swathes of URLs if you want. If you mix Oscar into your existing application, Oscar provides some things like login and register and forgotten password that you probably don't want if you already got them. So using this technique of just defining a few of these application classes, you can throw away big chunks of Oscar if you don't need it. Okay, so I've rattled through a bit about how Oscar is customized, but the summary really is, Oscar is there for people with difficult e-commerce problems. That's its sweet spot. We're not trying to compete with Shopify, we're trying to find a framework that makes it easy for people to solve these difficult problems. And to do that, we've created this thing which is designed for flexibility. Virtually anything inside Oscar can be customized using these techniques. The inspiration for how these things were designed has come from Django itself. Okay, so what's going to happen next? So we go to pitches where we meet kind of blue chip, enterprisey clients, that kind of thing, and we have a hard time trying to convince them not to use Hybris or Magento or some of these other big players in the e-commerce world. And there's several layers of battle. First, you have to argue about open source, because you'll meet people who are very against open source. And then you have to talk about why Python instead of Java or .NET, which will be their next favorite thing. And then you have to start talking about Oscar. And one thing that doesn't help us is that Oscar is currently in version 0.7, and so it's also kind of got a beta stamp against it. So by the end of the year, one of our targets at Tangent is to get it to version 1. At least that's one less thing we have to argue about in these kind of pitch meetings. And before we get there, there's a couple of things we want to revisit. The dashboard UX, I quite like to look a bit harder at how we manage kind of variant products, clothing, that kind of thing. We've had several requests for support for multi-tenancy sites. So you've got several domains that all show like a different subset of one larger catalogue, but that's all managed on one dashboard. So it's effectively one code base, but it's kind of several shops at the same time. So that's something we'll look at. There's an interesting question around how we integrate with CMSs. So Oscar currently has a few bits around managing what products you put on your homepage and how you merchandise, but there's all these great CMSs in the Django ecosystem. We want to spend some time working out what the sweet spot is and how we integrate them in a really nice way. There's something to do this summer. I actually wrote a quick blog article the other day with a bit more detail on some of these things we're looking into before we get to version 1. But the bigger picture really is, we want to get Oscar and Django, into these big companies that would normally have paid, £500,000 to use Hybris. So, we want to win this argument, with major companies around the world that they should be using Django. Something like, Django gives them the ability to rapidly develop applications that are solving the problems way better and way cheaper than the kind of off-the-shelf enterprise software they use at the moment. And that ultimately is definitely our hardest challenge, and that's what we're working on this. Okay, so I think I've gone through my 15 minutes. So there's more information, of course, if you just Google Django-oscar, you'll find all this information. So yeah, thank you for listening.